Hi, good evening, gentlemen. I wanted to share this with you guys. I'm been working on a series with my Rangers titled "To Be a Friend of God." We're going over the theme for that lesson is John chapter 15, verse 14 to 15. It starts off, "You are my friends if you do as I command." Okay, and then verse 14 just gives a description, the difference between what a servant is and what a friend is. Okay. But in this study, I came across something that I wanted to share. Unfortunately, my students are a little bit too young to truly receive this, so I wanted to share this with you all. Okay. Now it starts in Genesis chapter 12, 12 verse 1, and it concludes at Genesis chapter 13 to 18. Okay. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to ask you if you want to pause, go read it real quick. It'll take you just a couple of minutes to go through it. But these are the key things I want you to remember as you read it. Was the famine over? Okay. Now, in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, it starts off. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, this is the first time that we read about God speaking to Abram. Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house and unto a land that I will show thee. Okay. So we see this command, and afterwards you're going to see blessings that are going to be put on Abram, and not just Abram, his children and his future generation. That whoever blesses them will also be blessed, and anybody that tries to curse Abram's generation, they themselves will also be cursed. Okay. And but now remember, Abram was told to get out of the land, get away from your kindred, get away from your father's house, because there's a land that he has for him. Okay, so now Abram left Haran. This is where he was living before. He left Haran and he took his wife Sarai. He also brought his nephew Lot. Okay, and they left Haran and they went towards Canaan. Okay, and you see that in verse 5. All right. And on the way to verse 5, after verse 5, you're also going to read that once they get to the land of Canaan, Abram's going to build an altar towards the Lord. All right. And verse 10, we read that in the land of Canaan, a famine started. Okay. And so because of that famine, Abram had this genius idea, and I say that with all sarcasm, to leave the land of Canaan and go to Egypt. Okay, he didn't talk to the Lord. He didn't do any of that. He just got up his things, got up his family, and left to Egypt. All right, and on his way to Egypt, he tells his wife, "Listen, when you're a very beautiful woman, please tell them that you don't tell them that you're my wife. Tell them that you're my sister, so that way they don't kill me." All right. Well, they sure enough that happened. The Egyptians, they found her beautiful. They found her so beautiful that they brought her to the Pharaoh to be married. But God was against this, and He plagued the house of Pharaoh, and that's when Pharaoh realized Sarai was actually married to Abram, and because of that, he kicked Abram out of Egypt, and Abram went back to Canaan. My question was the famine over? Okay. So now in chapter 13, okay, he goes back to Canaan. He goes back to Canaan, and in 13 verse 4 it says, "Unto the place of the altar which he had made there at first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord." Now he's realizing, I know it. I need to talk to the Lord and see what he can do for what he can do. Okay, what he advises, what he recommends, where I should go with this. So now immediately it goes into this next conflict. All right, starting at verse 5, this part I am going to read. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Okay. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzites dwelt then in the land. So now, if you're reading this and you're still asking, was the famine still continuing? The next question then is is if the land was if the reason why that there was conflict between the two groups, was it because there was not enough resources, that everybody's fighting with each other, and they fighting with each other over food. And keep in mind, there were still Perizzites and Canaanites dwelling in the land, and it didn't sound like that they were having problems. It sounded like that they found a way to survive in this environment. But but Abram and Lot were meanwhile were fighting with each other. Well, their groups were fighting with each other. So Abram, he loved his nephew Lot. He wanted to maintain that brotherhood. So he would tell Lot, listen, let's separate so that way we can still maintain our brotherhood. You pick a direction, you can go, and then afterwards I'll go in the opposite direction. All right. So we and that was the plan. But we get to verse 14. And the Lord said unto Abram that after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. It's not until Lot leaves and is gone that now God tells Abram, stop what you're doing. You see where you are. Look that way, look that way, that way, that way. As far as you can, that is your land. Okay. So the question I asked that question, was the famine still present, solely because it looks like that, because Abram's disobedience from the beginning, when he was told to leave his kindred, but he brings Lot. Okay, he's willing to separate from his wife Sarai, but he's not willing to separate from Lot. Okay, God corrects that situation with Sarai. Says, no, this is your wife. You're going to stay with her, but this is your kindred. You were supposed to leave him back in Haran, and you didn't. But now that but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create so much strife in this famine land, for you to finally realize you need to separate from Lot. Okay. And so we see, so it was as soon as Lot leaves, now God says, okay, now you can have this land. You're not going in the opposite direction. This is your land. I promised you, not Lot. Okay. So the thing that I notice is that oftentimes we find ourselves in a situation where we're experiencing hardship. And what we're doing instead is we're working more just to try to go ahead and feed our family. We're working more to go ahead and take care of our possessions. We're working more to go ahead and take care of things, which isn't a bad trait because we're men. Our job as men is to be providers, okay? But at the same time, there are times in our lives where, as men, the best thing to do is, like, you know what? It's time to cut back. It's time to cut back on our cell phone. It's time to cut back on our cable. It's time to cut back on some of these subscriptions that we have, okay? Because clearly, there's too much. Clearly, we're not able to take care of this. And what's really going on is God saying it's time to start taking things out of your life that's causing a distraction. It's time to remove things out of your life that's I didn't tell you to have in your life. It's time to remove people out of your life, because these are not people that are going to edify who you are. I told you and I gave you strict instructions on what to do, and this is the promise that's going to come with this. In order for you to receive this, you need to separate from these things, from these people. Okay. So, and the next one I wanna give you all, as I bring this to a close, is First Corinthians chapter 3, verse. I'm sorry, First Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11, starting at verse 11. For other foundation can no man lay that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if any man build upon this foundation gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubbles, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire, and the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide which he has built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. So if what you have gets put through the test and it survives, that is your reward there, or a reward will come from that. Verse 15, though, if any man's work shall be burned, and he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, get so as by fire. Okay, and this is the benefit. This is the beauty of God putting um, the things that you've introduced to the test. If it survives this test, then it is worth. Then there's your reward, or a reward that's going to come through it. But if God puts you through a situation and you say, you know what, I don't need this. It's time to go and put this away. Okay. The good news is you realize you don't need that thing, or you don't need that person, and you will be saved. You will have you will grow from this, because not only were you obedient to the Lord, but you realize, you know what? Let me not fight with the Lord. Let me go ahead and let me stick with the bare essentials that I need, and not add this fluff to this. Okay. So I thank you very much for listening. I pray that this message touches your heart. I loved it, especially the fact that that in church today, Pastor Dan went over Lamentations chapter 3. I went back and I read the whole entire thing, and it is a depressing book. If anything, I wanted to say was that it was a complete opposite of how Psalms 23 read. But but it's a reminder that we were never promised an easy life in this world. But what we were promised was a way to salvation, and that is through the Lord Jesus Christ, through the blood that He shed on Calvary, so that way we can have eternal life with our friend Jesus. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. If you have anything to say, if you have anything to add, by all means leave a comment. And God bless you, and have a good night.